So I'm going to tell you how it is. Standard right now is just plain awful. Tournament attendance is really low, and the last few sets have had pretty apathetic design. It must be really awkward to show up at your F&M for Standard only to find that the 20 people there are just waiting for the 12 a.m. draft. In all seriousness, the reason why Standard is so bad isn't because of set design or any of that stuff. It's because it's lacking the essential ingredients that are needed to have a healthy Standard format. Don't get me wrong, change in Standard is good. After all, Standard is the only constructed format that still rotates nowadays. But when you take away an essential ingredient that made your product so successful and made everyone love it, people are going to stop buying that product. Hi, my name is Ryu Spector, and today I'll be talking about 5 key ingredients that are needed to make a healthy Standard format. I've been a Standard player for years now, and I've seen this format at its best and at its worst. Today, we're not really going to go over specific cards, but more so rules that are designed to keep Standard fun and healthy and interactive amongst its players. Anyway, let's begin with our first rule of the Code of Standard, which is always have 4 mana board wipes. And by 4 mana board wipes, I mean something that costs 4 mana that gets rid of all creatures. You can't really count Languish these days, because Languish doesn't always get rid of all creatures. If you play creatures with more than 4 toughness, you're going to kill all of your opponent's creatures that have less than 4 toughness, and if your opponent has nothing but creatures that have less than 4 toughness, and you have nothing but creatures that have more than 4 toughness, you're going to have all these creatures, because that is totally fair. There are 2 reasons why this is needed at all times. The first one is that 4 mana board wipes have been in Magic for so long that downgrading it to 5 mana just seems like kind of an insult. It's also really bad for teaching new players who are trying to convert from Standard to another format, because if you move on to another format and realize the harsh truth that board wipes cost 4 mana when all your board wipes cost more than 4 mana, then that's kind of painful and cruel. The second reason this is needed at all times is creatures these days are really good. And I'm not kidding. If you've been playing Magic as long as I have, creatures way back when were kind of, well, weak compared to creatures nowadays. These days, we have creatures that have so many awesome abilities. We have creatures that come back from the dead. We have creatures that split into more creatures when you kill them. We have creatures that turn into planeswalkers, and creatures that are indestructible. In short, because creatures are so good, board wipes need to be equally as good to keep up with them, and by adding more mana to the mana cost of a board wipe, that just doesn't really make any sense. The second rule of this Code of Standard is always have a 2 mana guaranteed ramp spell. And by guaranteed ramp spell, I mean a spell that gets you a land that gets you the mana that you want. Cards like Rampant Growth and Farseek are ideal for this. Now, you could say that Ruin in their wake can fill this spot, but this is not a good example because it's very limiting and kind of punishing. And you shouldn't really punish new players, especially if they're trying to get into higher formats, when they will discover that other cards do what their card does, only without any restrictions. Cards like Leaf Gilder are also in Standard at the moment, and they do ramp pretty nicely, but the problem with them is they're not always guaranteed to stick around because they are creatures and die to just about everything. The main reason why we need these spells in Standard is because Standard is the slowest of all constructed formats, and essentially pushing the cost of these spells is basically just kind of unreliable when they have been in Standard and Magic for a really long time. In addition, because they are fast ramp, we can get to play our big, meaty spells that Standard is so well known for even faster, and on top of that, because they give us every color mana, or access to every color mana, we can get what we want when we want it, and not have to worry about restrictions or our mana sources dying. It's just better. The third rule of the Code of Standard is have a plethora of alternate win conditions. This is actually something kind of critical because it actually really opens up the minds of new players and gets other players to think about how to win aside from damage, because the truth of the matter is this is a very creative game. You need to think a lot to do well in. And one way to do this is by, well, being creative and using an alternate win condition. It's really hard to believe, but at one point in Standard, we actually had Door to Nothingness, Laboratory Maniac, Nephalia Drownyard, and Maze's End in Standard at the same time, and believe it or not, those were not the only alternate win conditions in the format. What alternate win conditions are in Standard right now? Oh. This thing? Okay, that's a little weird. Has anyone actually won a game with this card? I mean, you're free to tell me. If you have ever won a sanctioned game of Magic with Hedron alignment, please send me physical proof. Aside from Hedron alignment, there actually are two other alternate win conditions in Standard right now, which are Felidar Sovereign and Mill. But aside from those, I really feel like there needs to be more because, well, it opens up creativity. Plus, as you get more experienced into playing Magic, saying if you always played Standard and you want to move into Modern or Legacy, you're going to have to learn that damage is not the only win condition, and in a sense, it's a great teaching tool of one of Magic's cruel lessons, is that conventional ways aren't always the best. The fourth rule of the Code of Standard is to always have activated and trigger ability hosers, and this rule is really, really, really important. Why, might you ask? Well, if you've been paying attention to Standard over the last 2 decades, you'll realize that one thing all of the banned cards have in common, or cards that have been banned from Standard, is that they have either activated or triggered abilities. This is the reason why cards like Jace the Mind Sculptor just grew out of control in Standard back in 2011. It was just insane. The only thing we really had to hose these abilities was Phyrexian Revoker, and to be honest, that didn't really work so well because all decks that played Jace the Mind Sculptor were control decks, and killing a 1 toughness creature was really not that hard. Honestly, I feel like the format needs at least 3 of these cards in the format at any particular time. For example, you can have 1 that's a creature, 1 that's an enchantment, and 1 that's an artifact. That way, your opponent will have to guess which one you are playing. It would also make your opponent think twice about playing cards like Jace or Hangerback Walker nowadays. Finally, we have come to the 5th rule of the Code of Standard. And to be honest, I think this is probably another one of the most important rules, as it keeps a lot of people happy. Oddly enough, this rule actually hasn't quite been broken yet, but it will be soon. This rule happens to be keep a core set, or at least have some way to keep good, solid reprints in Standard. The reason for this is because there is going to be no more core sets, hardly anything is going to be reprinted. And that's a big deal because, for one, cards are going to be harder to get, and also cards are going to be more expensive. A core set is the ideal place to reprint cards, and getting rid of it is just not a good idea. Another really good benefit from core sets is reprints allow older players to use their old cards in Standard, while at the same time bringing new players into the game and giving them powerful cards. Getting rid of a core set is just a really bad mistake because core sets are a big part of Magic's identity. So many powerful cards have come out of core sets, and losing those cards or losing the ability to reprint those cards puts a big hamper on you. The point is, no one should forget who they are, and losing a core set is a big part of your identity. Plus, I don't understand why you would get rid of it because it generates so much income, and everyone will be happy. Just think about it. Everyone wins. Old players get to play their old cards. New players get the old cards that the old players have and are well known throughout Magic. and Wizards makes money, so everyone wins! If anything, not having reprints in Standard is absolutely shameful, because Standard should have something for everyone, both new and old. After all, Wizards does want everyone to play the game, right? And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, 5 keys to a happy Standard format. Does there happen to be another reason that you think Standard is going to hell in a handbasket? Or do you think that Standard is the best that it has ever been, period, hands down, no questions asked? Feel free to tell me about it in the comments section below, and while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Ria Spector, and I'll see you guys next time.